Hello, everyone. So I was asked a question today: should a person get an MP5 or an Uzi? Okay. First of all, if money is no issue, sure, by all means, get it. Okay. But if you're on a budget, if you've got limited funds where you have to kind of pick and choose what you're gonna buy, um, let's approach it from that direction. So, first of all, you're probably not getting a full auto. Okay, so the MP5 Uzi, I think they have this roller delayed system. It's supposed to make shooting full auto a lot smoother, more controllable. Unless you're actually getting a full auto, you're not going to be able to utilize that. Okay, so practically speaking, you're not going to be able to tell the difference between a roller delay system and just a direct blowback 9mm. Okay, so that's the reality. Okay? And there's a video in my channel somewhere. If you look up my channel name and then Uzi, you should be able to find an old video where I'm actually shooting a full auto Uzi. And I've done lots of shooting with 9mm, simulated full auto. You can't tell the difference. Okay, I can't tell the difference. They're both controllable. I mean, yeah, there's a little bit of a difference. Okay, but it's not something that's really going to be that big of a deal. Okay, you're not going to be able to really tell the difference unless you're specifically paying attention to it. Okay, so here's the thing with the with either the MP5 or the Uzi. Okay, they both shoot 9mm. Okay, so most of the SWAT teams and anti-terrorist groups that back in the 90s were using those types of guns have all switched over to AR-15s that shoot 5.56. Okay, so here's the interesting thing here, right? MP5 and Uzi, they're not really competing with the AR-9. Okay, they were basically competing, or basically they were in the same space as the AR-15. Okay, so AR-15, that's what's used, for most close quarter combat. Okay, so yeah, I mean, you might say that the MP5 Uzi, they do really well. Well, so does this, right? But the difference is that AR-15 shooting 5.56 also gives you that capability that once you get outdoors, you can shoot out to 500 yards. Okay, so 9mm. I've done plenty of videos where I'm shooting AR-9 to 200 yards. 200 yards, no problem getting on a man-sized target 10 out of 10 times, right? Especially if there's no wind. But to get to 250 yards, there's a big step up. Okay, it becomes extremely difficult. To get to 300 yards, very difficult with with an AR-9. Okay, AR-15 on the other hand, okay, 300 yards, it's a cakewalk with this. Okay, 500 yards, I've done plenty of videos where I'm shooting, this 13-inch, I'm shooting 11.5 inches out to 500 yards, and I'm inside of 15 inches, right? My groups are inside of 15 inches. So the AR-15 gives you it gives you that same close quarter capability, but it also gives you the ability to get out to distance should the scenario change, right? Because a lot of times it's not just a question of, okay, you're indoors fighting. A lot of times it's, okay, you got to get to your position, and then you got to get out of that position. So you might, end up fighting over longer distances on the way in or on the way out. Okay, so if you're going in with either an MP5 or an Uzi that only shoots 9mm, you are at a severe disadvantage. Should the fight turn into a long distance fight. Okay, so from just practically speaking, for either an Uzi or an MP5, even with a semi-automatic clone, you're on the cheap end, you're probably looking to pay somewhere between $1,500 and $2,000 for basically a 9mm gun. That's really not going to be that much different than this AR9 that only costs like whatever $600-700, right? Maybe $800, depending on what company you get it from. So yeah, practically speaking, I mean, I just don't see the value. I don't see the payoff. Okay, if you want to shoot a 9mm carbine, okay, I mean, I think you're going to get the same satisfaction out of just an AR9, and there's plenty of good reasons to have an AR9 and shoot, 9mm carbines, because for one thing, I can shoot the steel targets fairly close with 9mm, whereas if I'm shooting 5.56, I got to be a little further back. Okay, so there's a big training value in shooting 9mm PCCs, right, pistol caliber carbine. The benefit of having an AR9 is that this right looks very similar to this, so the training I do with this carries over to this. Okay, so if I'm using either an MP5 or an Uzi, it's a little bit different, right? The layout is not a whole lot different, but it's a little bit different, right? On the MP5, you still have a similar selector level, right? I think it's a 45-degree throw, but it's like, okay, why? Okay, here's the thing. Because people can make an argument that, hey, that an MP5 clone or an Uzi clone, right? You might be able to make an argument that it is a better gun or a more reliable gun. Okay, so my thought on that is that, hey, if it is the same amount of money, right, somewhere in the area of about $600 as this Palmetto AR9, right? If it's the same amount of money, and that's the better gun, yeah, sure, I'll take that one, okay? But if it's twice as much money, right, or 3 times as much money, I mean, are you actually getting a gun that's 3 times better? Okay, and my opinion on that is no. Okay, I don't think you're getting a gun that is 3 times better if you buy an H&K, MP5, or either original or a clone. I mean, I don't think the gun is going to be that much good. I mean, it's not going to be a full auto. Okay, so in fact, it's probably because you can easily get either an FRT trigger or a binary trigger and put it into an AR9, because it's a very common gun. So companies make those type of triggers for these guns. If you're trying to get a trigger like that for either an Uzi or MP5 clone, first of all, I don't know off the top of my head if they even make it, and number 2, it's probably going to just be a lot more expensive, just because it's, because there's less of them made, less of them sold. You're going to end up paying a lot more money for it. Okay? So even if your goal is to, even if you're chasing after that full auto, that simulated full auto, I mean, you're more likely going to get it with an AR9 than you're going to get it with an MP5 or an Uzi. Okay, and like I said, the MP5, right? Here's an important thing here. The MP5 was essentially replaced, okay, by most SWAT teams and anti-terrorist groups. The MP5 was replaced by the AR-15. Okay, so the AR-15 and the MP5 occupy the same operational space. Okay, so for that close quarter fighting, okay, it's like, okay, you got MP5, all right, and Uzi versus AR-15. Okay, in CQB type of situation, they're all going to be probably just as good, okay? But the benefit of the AR-15 is if the fighting goes outdoors, you now have that 500-yard plus capability with the AR-15, which you do not have with the MP5 or the Uzi. Okay, so that doesn't make sense. So, by contrast, for example, if you're trying to compare, let's say, an AR-15 to an AR-10, okay, for the most part, they don't occupy the same space, right? Because the AR-15 is like from CQB all the way out to 500 yards, right? Maybe 600 yards. The AR-10, it fits an entirely different role, right? That's either barrier penetration or it's like 500 yards to 1,000 yards shooting, okay? So I'm just trying to illustrate the way I'm thinking about this, okay? So AR-15, AR-10, you know, they serve like essentially two different functions. Okay, you know, you can compare, let's say, an AR-10 to a SCAR 17, because now they're, you know, they're serving they're serving the same role basically. So that's something that you can compare, right? But now when you're looking at an MP5 or an Uzi, right, you're now in that same space. You also have to put the AR-15, because that's, you know, that's because the AR-15 excels also in CQB. So now it's like, okay, well, what if the fight goes outdoors and I've got an Uzi or an MP5? I am like seriously limited, right? You know, basically my max, the max distance that I can shoot at, you know, with confidence is basically about 200 yards. If I have an AR-15 and, you know, we end up on a rooftop or something, well, now I can go all the way out to 500 yards, maybe 600 yards, right? Even 700 yards with some match grade ammunition. So, anyway, my thoughts on that. I've been asked this question a couple of times over the years. Should I get an MP5? Should I get an Uzi? A lot of times people don't ask me. They don't even realize how expensive. Forget about how expensive getting an actual H&K MP5 is. But a lot of times they don't realize how expensive the clones are as well. And people have told me that I've heard complaints about the clones not being as reliable. I don't know. You know, I haven't had any issues with the ones that I shot. But I have heard that as well. So anyway, my thoughts on that. Drop some comments. I mean, I guess I should finish this off by saying, listen, guys, I'm a full-time gun instructor. Pretty much all my guns are a tax write-off. Okay, so if I thought that an Uzi or an MP5, if I thought that there was some real value there, right? If I thought that the gun could actually do something better than either of these two guns, I would buy it. Okay, I would buy it. I mean, I would probably make back my money pretty fast, right? Given that I'm running a business, you know, training people, and like I said, the gun itself is a tax write-off for me. So I don't have MP5. I don't have an Uzi. So that's the practicality of it. Okay, so that's something for you guys to think about. So drop some comments. Let me know what you guys think. I'll talk to you all soon.